Extraction is a brand new Netflix original movie directed by Sam Hargrave and stars Chris Hemsworth as a mercenary called Tyler Rake who goes on a special mission to rescue the kidnapped son of an Indian drug lord. Now, originally, I had no intention of watching this movie. From the name to the premise, and even the trailers, just gave off a very strong straight-to-DVD, you'd find it in the bargain bin sort of vibe. Which is why, originally, I was not going to watch it. But then, I found out that it was written by Joe Russo, one of the Russo brothers. I also found out that him and his brother Anthony produced the film. The director is also a professional stuntman. And also, when the movie came out a couple of days ago, I'd heard nothing but good things about this movie. So, taking all that into account, I thought, you know what, sod it, I'll give it a go. What's the worst that could happen? And, my lord, this movie is way better than it has any right to be. I didn't really expect much from it, but the fact that this movie ended up being as entertaining as it was surprised the hell out of me. Myself and most other people now are aware that having a stuntman as the director of your action movie actually works out quite well. I mean, just look at the John Wick franchise. That franchise is practically built on the fact that it is stuntmen showing people the best of their abilities and how well they can do said things. And Extraction is just another movie to back this point up. The stunt work in this movie is absolutely incredible, and also the camera work is pretty damn impressive as well. And the one thing I was thinking throughout this entire movie is that it does feel like John Wick set in India, and that's probably the biggest praise I can give this movie. The stunt work is absolutely phenomenal, and the way it's shot in this movie is really well. I mean, it's not as smooth and fluid as the John Wick movies, because they definitely care a lot more about a slick style and tone to complement the action scenes in the John Wick films. But here, it goes for a much more grittier and grounded approach to showing you the action, and there's actually some really cool uses of the camera throughout this movie, specifically this one simulated long take that goes on for quite a long time. And even though you can notice quite a few of the cuts throughout this scene, that's not to say it's very well executed. And the way it transitions from an on-foot chase to a car chase to a close quarters fight in a flat and then down to a hand-to-hand fight on the street, and how they all manage to capture this in what looks like a pretty convincing long take is really impressive. And you can tell from the way this movie is shot that Sam Hargrave is not just an impressive stunt performer and coordinator, but he also knows just the right way in how to show it in the movie. He knows when to cut at the right times, but also knows when to show you just the right kind of shot that it will leave an impact. For example, the first proper fight scene that happens in this movie, which takes place in like an open living room area, is incredibly brutal and ends on a shot that kind of makes you squirm a little bit, and also kind of lets you know how unforgiving this movie is, because that's another thing I want to say. This movie does not hold back. From within the first 5 minutes, where a kid gets shot in the face at point blank and it does not cut away, it just leaves it hanging on a wide, you know that this movie is not fucking around and that it goes as hard as it needs to. And that's one thing that I really did appreciate about this movie, because I know most action movies out there nowadays can kind of back off from being as violent as they really could be. I think the last time that I've really seen an action movie commit to its violence in a graphic way, but also a way that doesn't degrade the movie as a whole, is probably The Raid and The Raid 2. those were very stylish and slick action movies that were very well filmed, but also didn't hold back on the gore and violence, but also didn't show this violence in a way that was gratuitous. And Extraction almost feels like a return to that style of action filmmaking. You have intense action that is very well coordinated and structured and filmed, but also there is enough gore along the way to kind of back up the amount of violence in the movie and also back up its 18 rating. But yeah, I know some people have complained about the violence in this movie being a bit gratuitous. And there are a few bits near the start of the movie that are just like, fucking hell, okay, what? But that being said, I do think the violence in this movie is justified for the reason I just said. Another one of my favourite aspects of this film is Chris Hemsworth's performance as Tyler Rake, and also the friendship that blossoms between him and this kid Ovi, who he is there to rescue. I thought that was definitely one of the strongest aspects of this movie outside of the stunt work and action throughout the film. You definitely do feel that they get to know each other a bit more throughout the movie, and it is, like I said, one of the strongest aspects of the film, because you really do care for Chris Hemsworth's character a lot, especially by the end of the movie, and you also care a lot about this kid. Even though you don't get much development on his behalf, and you do get a fair amount of development for Chris Hemsworth's character, you still do feel for this kid, because he just grew up in this horrible life that he probably didn't ask for. And there's a lot that they really do push quite subtly throughout this movie, and I really did appreciate that aspect. You don't just focus on Chris Hemsworth's character and that's it. You also focus on this kid and how hard everything is for him, and the fact that they can connect over their hardships and really start to create a bond throughout the movie is really quite touching at times. That being said, though, the movie is not perfect. The script as a whole is very basic. I mean, just saying the premise out loud sounds like any other action movie from maybe the early 2000s or the 90s, which, you know, could be seen as a negative, but to be honest, the movie knows how simple its premise is and just kind of goes with it. And in that sense, it makes the very predictable plot work a little bit more and just makes you kind of go with it a little bit more. But at the end of the day, it is a very basic plot, and you can't not forget that. Also, there are a few specific effects throughout the movie, specifically some explosions, that look really fake and CG'd in, which is a shame because there are other moments throughout the movie where there are some very convincing practical explosions throughout the film. But that being said, there are some even more obvious moments where they just completely replace an explosion with a CG one and it looks incredibly fake. And I don't quite know why they didn't just stick with practical in that sense, because the practical explosions look convincing enough in the movie. Why didn't they just stick with that instead? In the end, though, I really did enjoy Extraction. It's way better than it has any right to be, which is why it gets a 7.5 out of 10 from me. Yeah, this is probably one of my favourite movies I've seen so far this year, alongside The Invisible Man. And I know that isn't saying much, considering I've only seen a very small handful of movies so far. But you've got to trust me on this one. Extraction knows what it is and just runs with it to the best of its ability. It's very well filmed and the stunt work is absolutely fantastic. So guys, that was my review of Extraction. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Bye.